a production of the New Jersey courts.
My parents always instilled in me that I could perhaps someday be a lawyer. Ironically, I didn't see that in myself. One of the biggest reasons that I'm an attorney, perhaps the only reason that I'm an attorney, is Irving R. Levine. Irving R. Levine was an economics correspondent for NBC TV, and he often covered work for the White House as well. And I worked at NBC TV, which was just down the street from where I went to college at the American University. And because we both worked in the evenings, he became a bit of a mentor towards me. And as a mentor, he gave me advice even if I didn't ask for it. He knew that I wanted to become a correspondent, and he tried to influence me and explain to me that I could become a communications attorney. There was a lot going on at the time where NBC, which was owned by RCA, was being bought out by GE. And because of my exposure to many areas of law in law school and the abilities that I had, I graduated or percolated towards becoming an immigration attorney. I represented thousands of people in helping them to, and these were usually binational couples, where I helped them to acquire their conditional permanent residency or their permanent residency, and then their naturalization applications were filed by me. And these were couples that oftentimes knew each other for just a short period of time. Some of the couples that I met had eloped after knowing each other for perhaps days or weeks. Others were very strong couples that had been together for years. Unfortunately, the same was not true for the couples that I knew who were gay and lesbian couples who may have known each other for years or for decades. And for those couples, they were not able to acquire benefits through their family-based cases. And the only other route, on most occasions, would be employment-based cases. So many, if not most, of these families that were lesbian or gay families could not acquire legal benefits to remain in the United States. In some of those cases, some of those people may have been eligible to acquire benefits through applications for asylum if they feared persecution in their country where they came from. In 2000, or 1999, there was a case that came down from the Board of Immigration Appeals which let people in the LGBT community be recognized for purposes of asylum applications where there was a fear of persecution in their home countries. And even with the Board of Immigration Appeals sending a clear message that people in the LGBT community should be protected if they feared persecution from either past persecution or future persecution in their home countries, there was still a great amount of subjectivity that judges were able to bring to a case. And sometimes that subjectivity was helpful and sometimes it was extremely harmful. One case from about 20 years ago, which stands out in my mind, was a binational couple where the foreign national was from Guatemala. And they were a lovely couple who had been together for well over a decade. And of course, there was no legal recognition of marriage. And so this person had no ability to stay in the United States lawfully, and there was no employment case that was available to her because she had lapsed in her status. And after an entire day of testimony, the immigration judge placed on the record in his holding, and proudly, I may add, that he wanted the record to reflect that the respondent was wearing heels and stockings and was wearing makeup and had none of the indicia of being a lesbian. And this was after perhaps 6 or 8 hours of testimony. It is, if nothing else, symptomatic of showing of how some subjectivity or significant amount of subjectivity was brought into the court system at that time. And if the same exact case had been before another judge, I'm sure asylum would have been granted, which is why we needed to put everybody on a level playing field. And so that case is seared into my mind as something where I knew at that point that we had to have marriage equality in the United States. And this was long before Obergefell came down in the Supreme Court, and it took a lot of time. But at that point, it was clear to me that we could not proceed with the law in its current form. I was personally appalled. I was professionally appalled by the situation with the inequity. And I started to see what I could do to advocate for people, both on a global level and more importantly on a local level here in New Jersey. What resonated with many is being excluded, for example, from the military, being excluded from the Boy Scouts, being excluded from the institution of marriage. There were many institutions that people and that I sensed over my lifetime that we were simply excluded from. And each of these cases built upon each other and were showing society at large that we were ready to be treated equally. And perhaps Obergefell finally opened up the door in the immigration context towards applications being adjudicated by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And nobody was looking to be treated any better than any heterosexual couple. I could tell you that the scrutiny that I saw in hundreds of LGBT cases that came before Homeland Security was the exact same scrutiny in cases that heterosexual couples would face, for example, where there's a presumption of fraud in any application. Garden State Equality was pending at the time when my husband had an exceptionally severe accident. He was a pedestrian in New York City where he was struck by a car. And in that crash, which happened in October of 2010, he sustained life-threatening injuries, and he had a traumatic brain injury with severe cranial hemorrhaging. He was rushed to Bellevue Hospital, and I was able to get there just a few moments after his accident. At the time, my husband and I had a civil union here in New Jersey, and nobody at Bellevue Hospital, including neurosurgeons, understood what a civil union was, which brings up the words from Justice Poritz, where she stated in her previous dissent that what we name things matters. People understand marriage. They didn't understand civil union. And so in the middle of the night after midnight, the neurosurgeons and the nurses were requesting that I return home to Asbury Park in order to acquire healthcare proxies and other powers of attorney so that I could act on his behalf. And I don't know of too many couples that would walk around with those documents on a minute-by-minute basis, and I don't know too many couples who would leave their spouse when somebody's literally dying. And I did not leave. His sister had to drive up from Delaware, and she did not have to provide any documentation whatsoever, not even an ID. She proclaimed that she was his sister. She had a different last name, and she was able to file. She was able to sign the authorizations for his surgery. And so that's what people understand, and that's what institutions understand. They understand the term of marriage. So shortly after the turn of the century, after the millennia, early in, I guess it was around 2000 or 2001, I started to realize that there could be other people like me, other professionals in the LGBT community, but I knew very few, less than a handful throughout the entire state. And I love New Jersey, and so many people kept telling me, you should set up a practice in the city, and I didn't want to. I enjoy practicing in Monmouth County, and even though my federal practice took me all over the Northeast region and all over the country, arguably all over the world, I really wanted New Jersey to be my base. And I thought that perhaps we could start with the association that represents all attorneys and all judges, which was the New Jersey State Bar Association. And I approached Carol Corbin Walker, who was the president at the time, and she was excited. She put everything into place to make it happen, and she made sure it happened, and fairly quickly. We started with a committee, and within 3 years we became a section. At this point today in 2018, I believe we're perhaps approaching 180 or 190 members. So we started with a few core members, and they worked very hard, and this has grown, and it's an extraordinarily diverse and vibrant section. We have attorney members from all over the state of New Jersey, and more importantly, from every conceivable practice area as well. It was never a dream of mine to become a judge. I was very happy in my career as an immigration attorney, but several things happened over the course of my professional career and in my personal life that first introduced the very notion that I could be a judge. The first would probably be my exposure to Judge Jacobson in Trenton when my husband and I were brought into the marriage equality lawsuit as the lead plaintiff. And until then, virtually or the vast majority of my representation of clients had been in the federal realm. However, any exposure that I had had to state courts was always very positive, and I just had tremendous respect for the AOC. I was also involved with the Supreme Court Committee on Minority Concerns, and as a private practitioner. And through that committee, I was also exposed to many judges. And again, I had a very positive perspective on the judiciary. And so it began to percolate and evolve in my mind that I could perhaps be a judge here in the state of New Jersey. Well, New Jersey is tremendous. I'm still meeting new judges all over the state of New Jersey who are in the LGBT community. And so I'm happy to see that we're making extreme progress. And I hope that there's a point sometime soon, I'm sure there will be a point sometime soon, where there will be more people in the LGBT community who are working not only as judges, but in the AOC system throughout the state. And I'm very happy to see where we're moving and how we're making progress so quickly.